I'm the clinical director for Warriors Rest Foundation, which is a nonprofit that helps teach wellness and peer support for agencies and departments, first responders, law enforcement, EMS, really kind of across the country. Prior to that, I had a private practice where I specialized in working with law enforcement and first responders for about 28 years. Actually got involved in that culture because I responded to the Oklahoma City bombing in April of 1995. And so I've been working with first responders ever since. So in my experience in working with first responders, a very common theme was just the stigma of reaching out and asking for help and asking for assistance.
Those residents who will be discharged from the hospital, they were dispatched 1331.
I was a firefighter for 26 years. I retired last August. I was an EMT for over 20 years. Taught first responder, technical rescue, and some EMT at OSU OKC. And now I've been a law enforcement officer for 20 years. Very rarely in any first responder agency, be it EMS, police, or fire, do you get closure. I believe that we're secondary victims to everything that we deal with.
So what tends to happen is people first responders finally reach out.
I thought I knew what counseling was, but I had no idea. I really honestly had no idea.
And ask for assistance.
It's not laying on a couch and talking about things that happened when you were a kid. It's dealing with the issues.
When, as I call it, their bucket is full.
And what I learned is I have a bucket, and my bucket was full, and my incident didn't fill my bucket up.
What tends to happen, especially over a career, is if you don't empty your bucket along the way, then it's going to overflow.
You carry a backpack. You start with this backpack when you're a child, and things from your childhood go in that backpack. Things from your job go in that backpack. Things from your family go in that backpack. Well, trauma goes into that backpack too.
I mean, just things that I hadn't dealt with, and I can still very vividly see some of the accidents and stuff that happened, 20 years ago.
I can't tell you exactly how my PTSD and depression came about, other than I never talked about feelings ever to anybody.
Most people, general public, and I was as guilty as anybody, of looking at first responders like little bitty kids look at their parents. Little kids don't look at their parents like they're human beings and they have emotions and they are impacted by things. They look at their parents like they're gonna, they're big and tough and they're gonna take care of things and I shouldn't have to worry about it. And I realized that the public looked at first responders the same way. And then I thought that that's pretty crazy to expect human beings to be exposed to the things that they're exposed to on a regular basis and not be impacted by it.
And as you get older and you see and experience more trauma and stress and things that normal people do not see every day like we do as firefighters, you put those things in your backpack.
For over 20 years I haven't emptied my bucket, and that all goes back to the very beginning of being a first responder and even before.
Kind of the analogy I use is when the bucket gets full and overflows, it tends to splash all over everybody around them, predominantly at home.
I never really noticed myself having a problem at all. It was my wife.
I'm thankful that I have a strong enough wife that she set me down at the table and said, you got to do something.
My wife could tell when things were bothering me, and I never talked to her about anything because I didn't want her to know, or my family to know, or guys I worked with to know.
The belief was, if this is bothering me, I'm afraid somebody's going to tell me I can't do my job, that I'm not made of the right stuff.
And I really didn't think I had a problem. I really didn't. What I didn't realize is I was angry.
They get into these professions because they care, because they want to make a difference, because they have compassion for other people. And so therefore, they're going to be impacted by the things that they see and smell and have to touch and deal with on a regular basis. And in my experience, the stigma has been there that they're not supposed to be impacted. They're not supposed to let people know if they're hurting.
It seems like we're having more and more suicidal threats throughout the county. Within the last 6 weeks, I could count you 2 suicides, 1 fireman killed in an automobile accident.
Just this year we've worked in probably the last month and a half. I think we've run 5 or 6 fatality accidents. Unfortunately, some of them were the people that we know. Beaver County's roughly 1,800 square miles and a population of just over 5,000. So a lot of the people that you're responding to, especially the wrecks, the medical calls, you pretty well know all of them.
The calls that really get to me are kids. There's not always a lot of time to debrief, to disseminate all of the emotions that a person goes through. There's just things that stick out in your mind, and you can replay those over and over and over every day. It kind of builds up. You don't realize it, how much your cup fills up until you have a big tragedy, maybe somebody close.
I think we were so numb to seeing the images that we see and stuff. It's different when you know the guy's wife that just died in the car.
I try not to run on medical calls a whole lot, just because, I'm born and raised here and I know people. But I know there's going to come a time when it is going to be one of the people that I know and have been around. And
the first one I go to, I start down through there and they stop me. Well, I end up taking the guy out of the car, and it was somebody that I knew, but I didn't know who it was at the time. I just focus on what we're doing at the time and try to keep that way to, I want to say, keep myself sane or whatever. That's the trouble they say with being with a small department is you know everybody.
the first thing that comes to your mind when you're pulling up on an accident is that your wife or your kids, your daughter, your teenagers, I had one guy that told me that was really good friends of mine. He said that when he came upon a person that he nearly knew and it was his close friend, that he couldn't deal with it for the longest time. He wanted to quit. But that's not the reason why he volunteered his time, is to help the rest of the community out.
It's important to keep in mind that the healthier the first responders are, then the better they're going to be for their community and for the people they're trying to help.
We did have a tragedy a couple of years ago that hit very close to home.
As me and my partner's coming into town, we get a phone call from the sheriff's office wanting to know if I knew where my assistant lived. I told my partner yes. Why? He was talking suicidal.
We had a suicide here that it was mandatory that we all showed up because it was a fireman.
He had already done it within the minute and a half of the time we got the call.
Chief kept a lot of people away because they didn't need to see a lot of it.
Wouldn't let my guys go in, didn't want them to see what had happened to our assistant. Didn't want them to carry that nightmare.
When you got a lot of new, especially you got a lot of new guys, they don't need to see a lot of it.
It's 2:30 in the morning. I don't know why I can't sleep. I'm pissed off about it, and I can't quit thinking about that wreck. Just to have somebody to call.
And I'm glad that before I retire that we're dealing with this, because I could see where it would just completely ruin your retirement.
Somebody that doesn't know you, somebody that's anonymous, you know. Sometimes just to get it off your chest. I think that would help us out here as much as anything.
Workman's comp and insurance doesn't really see mental health as an injury, and I'm gonna tell you, it's absolutely an injury.
I'm all for it, and I hope people will get behind Oklahoma State Fire Association and really put in the funding to get this project up and running, because I have a feeling it would be a very big beneficial to volunteer departments, full-time, I mean any first responders whatsoever.
Having the financial resources available to help first responders be able to get the resources they need in order to be the healthiest they can be and do the job the best they can be is extremely important. My goal is for them to have a successful career, a successful family, and a successful retirement. And if they don't empty that bucket along the way, then they're not going to have all of those.